Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rom.
In our top story, the Biden administration is negotiating the transfer of $17 billion to Iran. Former U.S. President Donald Trump enforced crippling sanctions against the radical Shiite state for its participation in international terrorism and its rapidly progressing nuclear program. This caused Iran's currency, the rial, to tank and sent the Iranian economy into a downward spiral. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has begun to backtrack America's hardline stance on Iranian-sponsored terror and is attempting to restart negotiations with the rogue Islamic Republic. The White House announced that it is willing to allow Iraq and South Korea to transfer $17 billion to Tehran in exchange for the release of 3 American hostages and the agreement to freeze certain aspects of its nuclear program. High-ranking Biden officials traveled to the Gulf state of Oman for indirect talks with Iranian officials. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei expressed his support for a new agreement, but stressed that the existing infrastructure of the nuclear industry should not be touched. This caveat is especially troubling since the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency stated that Tehran has already amassed enough enriched uranium for several nuclear bombs. Israeli leaders from across the political spectrum are taking a united stand and are speaking out against negotiating with the terror state. Yochanan has more on that.
Yes, Rebecca, the Knesset's coalition and opposition leadership are united against another bad deal with Iran. In a rare show of bipartisan support, Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid announced that Jerusalem opposes returning to the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or any similar nuclear accord. Israel views Tehran's nuclear program as a direct threat and has expressed concern that a new agreement could legitimize Iran's nuclear activity and diminish support for preemptive military action. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu briefed the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee on the issue and said Israel will not be constrained by a new nuclear deal. He stressed that our position is clear. No agreement with Iran will be binding on Israel.
Newly declassified intel reveals that Jerusalem went on the offensive and attacked the Islamic State in its prime. Israel's former IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot, recently disclosed that the IDF killed hundreds of fanatic ISIS fighters in 2015. He said ISIS knows best how much the IDF operated in the Middle East, and they paid the price of hundreds of casualties. He said the campaign against ISIS was intensive and far beyond that of any other country, with results that surpassed all imagination.
The Biden administration has informed the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization that it intends to rejoin the agency. The United States pulled out of UNESCO during the Trump administration, citing that body's long list of anti-Israel resolutions. For example, UNESCO recognized the biblical tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron as a Palestinian World Heritage Site in danger. Now, that move effectively refuted thousands of years of documented Jewish heritage. It also approved a resolution denying Jewish ties to the Temple Mount. Washington and Jerusalem withdrew funding from UNESCO when it granted membership to the Palestinians in 2011. The United States withdrew its participation from the world body in 2018, and Israel quickly followed suit. Now, to rejoin UNESCO, the Biden administration will have to shell out over $500 million in unpaid dues. President Biden will also have to waive the law prohibiting the U.S. from funding any UN organization that recognizes Palestine as a state.
Israel is expanding economic ties with the Philippines. Foreign Minister Eli Cohen led a delegation to Manila recently where he touted increasing cooperation between the countries. He said last year a peak was reached in trade between Israel and the Philippines with a 70% increase in Israeli trade and a 94% increase in exports. He said the Israeli embassy in Manila and the Philippine government aim to double mutual trade within 5 years. Cohen also announced the impending agreement for direct flights between the countries, which will promote tourism and trade and strengthen the warm relations between the two nations.
Hundreds of Israeli officials, including ministers and members of Knesset, gathered in support of extending Israeli sovereignty throughout Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley. A recent conference held by the sovereignty movement saw a large showing of support for this issue. Organizers are urging the Knesset to immediately apply sovereignty, first in the Jordan Valley and then in all of Judea and Samaria. This issue enjoys broad coalition approval, and dozens of Israeli leaders pledged to back the initiative, including Transportation Minister Miri Regev, who said, "We have a shared mission to implement sovereignty, and with God's help, we will do it."
Palestinian terror leader Mahmoud Abbas was in Beijing last week for his 5th official visit to China, where he met with the president and premier of the People's Republic. Wang Wenbin, the spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, said Abbas is the first Arab leader to be hosted in Beijing this year and that he is a good friend of the Chinese people. China is attempting to insert itself into Middle East politics. Beijing has repeatedly called to support the Palestinian cause and the establishment of a Palestinian state.
Beauty queen turned political activist Sarah Edan has announced that she will be running for a seat in the United States Congress. The former Miss Iraq made waves in her home country when she befriended Miss Israel at an international beauty pageant in 2017. She and her family received death threats and were forced to flee the war-torn country after a picture of her was published with the Israeli contestant Adar Gondelsman. Now, 1 year later, the women met in Israel, where Edan toured the Holy Land. And in 2019, Edan was stripped of her Iraqi citizenship after addressing the United Nations at an event marking the expulsion of Jews from North Africa and the Middle East. She went on to become the CEO of Humanity Forward, an organization aimed at building bridges between Muslims and Jews. Edan announced that she will be running as a Democrat for California's 30th District in the U.S. House of Representatives in November of 2024.
Israel is testing a new fleet of drone taxis. These autonomous aircraft can carry passengers as well as heavy cargo. The Jewish state has made huge investments in the Israel National Drone Initiative, which it hopes will help to relieve heavy congestion on Israel's roads. Transportation Minister Miri Regev announced the program, which is the first of its kind in the world. She explained the collaborative project examines all aspects, including regulation and legislative changes involved in the commercial operation of drones, as an additional tool to deal with congestion. Earlier this year, Israel launched test flights for a fleet of 11 all-electric drones, which are capable of carrying up to 485 pounds to a distance of up to 99 miles.
In sports news, Team Israel clinched the third-place spot in the Under-20 FIFA World Cup games. This was the Jewish state's greatest performance at a FIFA tournament and was Israel's first-ever trip to the Under-20 games. The Israeli squad lost to Uruguay in the semifinals, but came back to win the bronze medal by defeating South Korea. Coach Ophir Chaim recalled the moment at the 85th minute of the match when Israeli and Argentinian fans began singing Hatikva, the national anthem of Israel. He said they created an atmosphere as if we were home. The games were originally scheduled to be held in Indonesia, but members of that country's government joined public calls to ban the Jewish state from participating. Just months before the scheduled start, FIFA announced that it was stripping Indonesia of its honor to play host, and they moved the games to Argentina.
Israeli and French archaeologists have replicated an ancient flute from bone fragments found near the Sea of Galilee. The researchers published an article in the peer-reviewed Nature Scientific Report, which describes the discovery of 7 different ancient flutes. Dr. Laurent Devin examined bones found at the En Malala excavation and discovered man-made holes cut at even intervals. He said one of the flutes was discovered complete and is known as the only one in the world in this state of preservation. Researchers believe that these flutes were made to mimic bird calls for hunting. The scientists announced plans to play the flute in late fall in the Hula Valley during the major bird migration. They hope that the sound will attract large birds of prey, such as hawks and falcons.
Israeli officials expressed their sorrow on the passing of evangelical leader Pat Robertson, who was instrumental in garnering Christian support for the Jewish state. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Robertson a great friend of Israel, second to none. He fondly remembers many meetings with Robertson, whose warmth and steadfast friendship stood the test of time and circumstance. Josh Reinstein, the director of the Israel Allies Foundation, said Robertson was a great friend of the Jewish people and a trailblazer in the Christian Zionist movement in the United States. He was a stalwart advocate for the Jewish state, educating and influencing millions in America and around the world to stand with Israel.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Asher Fredman. He's the Israel director of the Abraham Accords Institute. Asher, thank you for being on the show.
It's wonderful to be here, Josh.
Asher, tell our viewers a little bit about what is the Abraham Accords Institute.
The Abraham Accords Peace Institute is an American institution founded by Mr. Jared Kushner and led by Mr. Rob Greenway, whose goal is to help ensure that these historic agreements, the Abraham Accords, reach their full potential in all fields, whether it's economics or tourism or people-to-people or culture and arts. We want to make sure that these agreements have their true transformative impact on the entire region.
Everyone's talking about the Abraham Accords. It's become a huge success, peace with countries we never thought we'd have peace before with. What are some of the big successes that came out of the Accords?
So some of the big successes have been in the headlines, billions of dollars in trade, cooperation on cybersecurity and renewable energy and desalination. But what's even more exciting in my view are the multilateral projects, the projects that are bringing together these new peace partners from around the region to do things that none of them could do on their own. So just give one example, we are working on a project in Sudan. Sudan is a country with quite a lot of people who are hungry, and we're bringing together Moroccan, Emirati, Israeli, and UN partners in order to regrow and revitalize agriculture in Sudan to feed the people of Sudan, but to show the people from around the region the prospects of peace.
Abraham Accords was a big priority of the Trump administration, but it seems like the Biden administration has put this on the back burner. Is there a reasoning before that?
The Biden administration has advanced the diplomatic elements of the Abraham Accords, for example, via the Negev Forum, which they established, which brought together the foreign ministries. But it's true, it appears that the Trump administration made it a higher priority, and certainly just as American investment and prioritization was critical for achieving the Abraham Accords, it will be critical for their continued success.
One of the big disappointments was that we weren't able to bring Saudi Arabia into the Abraham Accords. In fact, just recently, a few months ago, they signed a peace deal with Iran going in the other direction. What do you have to say about that?
So we've seen some positive steps vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia, baby steps, whether it's the Israeli permission to fly over Saudi Arabia, or whether it was, for example, the head of one of the major Israeli banks speaking at a conference in Saudi Arabia. But you're absolutely correct that it's not where we had hoped it would be. And here too, greater American investment and involvement and assistance would certainly be important for making this historic possibility of peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia into a reality.
Lindsey Graham was here about a month and a half ago, and he said that this is do or die now for the Saudi Arabian-Israel peace deal. But he says that there's still a chance. Did you see some positive aspects there?
It's clear as Saudi Arabia looks to diversify its economy to go more in the direction of technology, of sustainability, of innovation, to draw more tourists. The benefits for both Israel and Saudi Arabia of deeper cooperation are tremendous. Overland trade connecting the West and Europe via Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia to the Gulf could revolutionize global trade. So the benefits are very great, and we certainly hope that, as Senator Graham says, we are able to move forward and make that possible.
One of the amazing things about the Abraham Accord is it wasn't just peace between governments. It wasn't the government of Israel and the government of UAE. It's between the people. The people generally like each other. How is this possible in the framework of the Middle East that the people are getting along so well? We have 4 flights a day to the UAE. They have 4 flights back here. I mean, what's going on?
It's amazing. We've seen since the Abraham Accords 17 new flights connecting the region. We've seen hundreds of thousands of Israelis visiting all of these countries. I think it goes to, in the UAE, in Bahrain, and in Morocco, you have a true culture of tolerance, of interfaith dialogue and cooperation. And bringing together, there's been real excitement to have Jewish people, Jewish Israelis, and Jews from around the world walking freely in the streets of these countries. I was just in Abu Dhabi a few weeks ago. I visited the Abraham family house, a magnificent complex created by the vision of the leader of the UAE, which houses a mosque, a church, and a synagogue all in one complex. And it's a beautiful expression of this ethos of interfaith tolerance. And I think that the Abraham Accords have created the possibility for the Middle East to move from a center of conflict to a global model of what interfaith cooperation could really look like.
It seems like an episode of The Twilight Zone. You go to like the UAE or even Morocco, they have synagogues that they're building. They're building synagogues for Jews, churches, mosques. But then you go to Europe and you still have people rallying death to Israel, death to the Jews in the streets. What's going on where in the moderate Arab world we're seeing a lot of support for Israel, but in traditional Western areas we're not seeing any of that support?
Look, I think that Western countries and Israel really do have a lot to learn from these countries. Now, in the Muslim world as well, there's a struggle going on between radical Islam and this moderate Islam. And I think, and I hope and believe that this path that's being led by the leadership of the UAE, by the King of Morocco, by the leadership of Bahrain, will win the day and will influence the wider Muslim world. And yes, I definitely think that the leaders of Europe should wake up and take a look and say, this is what true personal safety and true intercultural harmony looks like.
Asher, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
The Abraham Accords, like the State of Israel, are a true modern-day miracle, but they won't reach their true potential on their own. And good people from all walks of life, all sectors, all countries can play an important role in strengthening this new warm peace and in helping ensure that it reaches its potential. So I'd like to invite everybody to play a part in strengthening these new ties of peace in the Middle East.
Thank you, Ash, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom, and welcome to the Return to Zion with Karen Hayesod. I'm Sam Grundwerg, World Chairman of Karen Hayesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. After 2,000 years, we found the descendants of the lost tribe of Dan. The Jewish people of Ethiopia need your support. Please join us in welcoming them home to Israel. God bless you from Jerusalem.
In that day, the Lord will reach out his hand to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people from Assyria, from Egypt, from Cush, from Elam, from Babylonia, from Hamat, and from the islands of the Mediterranean. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 11. Through their deep faith, Roy and Yuklin Chen, a devout Bible-believing Christian couple from Hong Kong, received a sign from heaven revealing their personal mission in life to help realize God's promise to return the exiled people of Israel back to their ancestral homeland. 1 year after the historic and inspirational journey to Ethiopia, Roy and Yuklin Chen have witnessed the prophetic vision gathering momentum through the continuation of the Ethiopian Jewish community's Aliyah to Israel. Within the last year alone, some 1,400 Ethiopians have returned to Israel through the assistance of Karen Hayesod, but many more have yet to complete their journey.
To have the whole prophecy being lived out right before us was simply overwhelming. Not only was it difficult to see the people in the camps waiting to go back to Israel, but when Father God gave us a message to share with them, which was simply that Abba, Father, has not forgotten them, that every one of them will be brought back to their homeland. And to use a couple that's living on the other side of the world, doesn't even know where Cush is or what Cush is, that's the length that Father will go to reach his children.
Roy and Yuklin came to Bangkok to an event hosted by the Friends of Israel of Karnai Yesod. They were joined by 1,500 Christian worshippers who gathered to help the fulfillment of the biblical prophecy come true.
Now Israel is 70 years old. It is time that we bring Israel home so that we can join to our brothers and be one new man.
We believe it is our privilege, each and every one of us, the Gentiles, to rally around our brothers and sisters in Israel and to take part in what the Lord has already set in motion.
Roy and Yuklin know that their mission has only just begun and are committed to making sure that all the remaining Ethiopian Jews are brought home to Israel.
The biggest blessing is not that, oh, if I give, then I will get financial reward. The biggest blessing is to know that your God is real and He keeps every one of His promises. And every promise that is made to you is going to happen because He answered the prayers of His people and they are coming home. And you can be a part of it.
He will raise a banner from the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 12.
Together we will bring all our brothers and sisters back to Jerusalem.
Now is the time to act. There is still so much more we can do. Join the Chens and Karnai Yesod in this fulfillment of the biblical prophecy.
Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit khisrael.org.
And now, shining light from Israel.
Located in the heart of Jerusalem is its most important feature, the Old City. The Old City, Jerusalem, was established as the physical capital of the Jewish people 3,000 years ago by King David. However, the walls that surround the Old City today are relatively young, dating back a little over 500 years ago and built by the Turkish Emperor, the Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. And to mark this accomplishment, he has a plaque etched in stone commemorating this massive edifice, 1 square kilometer surrounding the city of Jerusalem. And today, we're going up to the top of these walls to the Ramparts Walk, which has 2 sections, a southern and a northern, and we'll be covering both of them today. So follow me, let's go. As we walk towards the stairs going up to the top of the walls, the ramparts, we are going to see structures that date back to the First Temple period, Second Temple period, and every period that came after the destruction of the temple as well. So come with me as we head up to the top. So cool to be walking here on the ramparts, the top of the old city walls, and seeing these teeth come up over here, this correlated wall, and the openings in which the fighters, the defenders of the old city could fight those attacking Jerusalem from up on top. Amazing. Some of the views that you have behind me into the new city of Jerusalem include the first neighborhood that was built outside the old city walls, a neighborhood known as Mishkanot Shananim, only built about 160 years ago in the year 1860. You also have the King David Hotel, the David Citadel, and Hebrew Union College, which is the headquarters for the Reform Judaism movement. Behind me, you can see one of the iconic structures here in Jerusalem, known as the Tower of David. But it really has nothing to do with King David. In fact, it's a modern structure built roughly about 500 years ago during the Turkish period, and it's a minaret for a mosque that they built here. Now it's interesting because here you get to see both physically and spiritually the timeline of Jerusalem. The base of that structure is Jewish, 2,000 years ago, built by King Herod. And then the Christians during the Crusader period. And then later on, you have the Muslims coming here. So you can literally see who came first, who came second, who came last, and then there's me, representing the Jewish people who have now returned to our Holy Land forever. Let's continue the tour. There are so many great features to the Ramparts Walk that really allows the visitor to understand the story, the history of Jerusalem. One of the ways that the Ramparts Walk does that is using the figurines you can see here to my left. These incredible statues that were printed using a 3D printer have a QR code next to it that you can scan with your smartphone or tablet that will tell the story of the individual that's depicted in the statue. And here we have a British soldier telling the story of the British Mandate, which lasted for roughly about 30 years. From the top of the ramparts, you get to see how alive the city is, both the new and the old. Behind me, the new city, Jaffa Street, the light rail, the municipality of Jerusalem. And the old city, schools, apartments, basketball courts. It's just amazing.
This has been an incredible day, walking on top the old city walls, seeing all of its four quarters, the Jewish quarter, the Armenian quarter, the Christian quarter, and the Muslim quarter. Everyone calling out to God, striving to bring peace to Jerusalem. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elron, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.